It is a beautiful day outside, isn't it? The sky is very blue, and we'd best prize it right now, shouldn't we? Because we all know that Grand Rapids is famous for its clouds. And they came back here for a day or so in the middle of the week when the cold front blew through and finally tossed out that lingering summer heat and humidity. It lasted a long time. You know, it occurred to me that Grand Rapids is, well, it's the original Seattle. After all, this was the old Northwest Territory. And this is the original West Coast. And here we are, right near the coast. And I can't quite figure out how that city got to be so big and popular, and Grand Rapids has been not as generously blessed. I just can't figure that out. But they also have clouds and rain too, and somehow that doesn't keep them from, well, that's another story altogether. But yes, the season has finally turned, and some people arrived with jackets, and some people arrived wishing they had jackets, and the leaves are blowing. I tried to convince my son to sweep the driveway yesterday. You'll notice I said tried. The father of a teenager is learning to be a diplomat. Negotiation is important. And we like turning things, don't we? We like turning seasons. We like songs by Pete Seeger that tell us about turning. We like shaker tunes that tell us to turn, turn will be our delight. Turning, yeah. And as I pointed out earlier, it is the season that Judaism calls the days of turning, the Yamai Shuvah, the time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, toward the end of the Day of Atonement. And I just mentioned that it's Ramadan, which is a time of turning inward. A lot of contemplative stuff. Now, according to the Jewish tradition, on Yom Kippur, your name will either be in the book of life or not, depending on whether one makes a sincere repentance. And a sincere repentance is not the thing you make to God. I should point that out. In the tradition, God won't even listen to your apologies until you've made up with all of your brothers and sisters. It's very clear that God is not in the business of forgiving anything that goes on between me and thee. And so Jews spend the days before Yom Kippur conducting what someone else might call a searching and fearless moral inventory. Yeah, you know what I mean. Where have I fallen off the wagon this year in some variety of ways, not just the alcohol wagon, but the goodness wagon and the decency wagon and the grown-up wagon and the fairness wagon. And then you have to go, as Bill W. would say, and make amends. Make sincere efforts to reconnect with people whose relationships have been broken. For the last month, those of you who have been here know that I've been lifting up themes related to this: failure, fallibility, folly. In essence, I've invited you for the last month to search yourselves, as the book of prayer says, consider your manifold sins and wickedness, which sounds like anything but a liberal point of view, doesn't it? After all, it was often the burden of guilt and shame that brought some of you into this place from other churches where you were flogged relentlessly about your unworthiness and sinfulness and inability to be decent no matter how hard you tried. For those who dared to question and defied those other religions, you came here either out of outrage or being outcast. How can any liberal or progressive religious viewpoint have anything to do with sin and repentance? Well, it's simple. Human beings make mistakes. And no matter how liberal we are, we're still good at making mistakes. And this fact that we make mistakes has to be accounted for, even in a positive point of view. I'm going to go even further and say, ironically, at the end of it, it is our capacity to make mistakes that is the actual basis of a worthwhile, progressive, spiritual attitude. far from the thing we want to get away from. We need to get back in touch with sin, because it's what we need to be aware of in another sense for the reason of our being. And this will take a moment or two, but I think you can come along for the ride. Last week, my wonderful colleague, Nuria Love Parrish, uplifted another basic principle of liberal religion, which is the ongoing nature of the truth, that it wasn't written down once, put in a book, so that you can refer to it ever after. Now, this is something that we are not alone in thinking. Progressive Christians, Jews, Buddhists, and Muslims know that the truth is still happening. If they didn't believe it, they wouldn't have computers now, would they? So not only is the truth not contained in one book or one faith, it is incomplete even now. If you paid attention to our first hymn, a great old Jewish hymn, the words said, "In prophet words it spoke of old, and speaketh still." Whatever God might exist is still in the act of making things happen. Now, how does this connect with human imperfection? Well, it's really quite simple. If there's still not all the truth there's going to be, it's not done yet, is it? And if it's not done yet, it's incomplete. And I don't know about you, but if you ever read directions that didn't have all the pages, if you ever tried to do something you didn't know entirely how to do, if you didn't have all the information, you probably didn't get it perfect, did you? When all else fails, we say, read the instructions. Well, the instructions haven't been written down yet. Wonderful piece of email came to me years ago. I read it and it said, "This life is not a test. If it were, you would have been given instructions on where to go and what to do." Think about it. When I was a child, Nuria quoted Paul, the great Christian. And in a sense, we're all children, no matter how old we are, because we still don't know it all. After all, some of the people we don't like most in the world are people who aren't know-it-alls, right? We don't know it all. We don't understand it all, no matter how old we are. In fact, I can be quite clear to anyone younger than me that the more I learn, the less I know. I see a few heads that understand that. But I'm here to say this is not just a human fact. It's a universal fact. Nothing in the universe has got it all together. Not one thing. Not just us. And if you're a God-loving person, not even God has got it all together, because it isn't all there to get together yet. And that means anything, you, me, even God, can screw up. Now, how can God be wrong, you say, and still be God? Isn't God perfect? Isn't God supposed to do everything right from beginning to end? Well, this is a really bad question. It presumes God to be perfect in the first place. Some faiths actually assert this, but it's really not necessary to believing in God. It really isn't. You know, if you read your Hebrew scriptures carefully, there are instances of God changing his or her mind. For example, God makes everything. Human beings screw up, and God decides, I'm going to wipe it all out with a flood. Does this sound like someone who planned ahead? And then after the flood, God says, well, I won't do that again because it didn't work out either. God sends Abraham to sacrifice Isaac after waiting his whole life to give him Isaac. What was going on? And then at the last minute says, wait a minute, I didn't really mean that. And God resolves to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. But Abraham goes up and says, but, there may be some good people there. And God says, there are no good people. Well, maybe, are there 50 good people there? And God says, okay, well, if there are 50, I won't kill the city. But if there are 40, why would you make the difference between 40? Abraham negotiates with God. And God gives in. Do perfect beings change their minds? No. And far from being a bad image of God, I really like this image of God. Working it out, trying to figure it out. Now, let me turn to a coldly logical passage